Well, it's been a while, and I finally bit the bullet and I had my eyes worked on. So, we're not going to talk about that, but let's talk about dealing with grief. I've had my fair share of it recently, and nobody likes to talk about it, nobody likes to deal with it, and it's really the last thing you want to talk about, but I think talking about it is probably the best therapy there is. About a little over 2 weeks ago, I lost my dad. And it was sudden. It was not like a long illness. You know, it's one of those dreaded phone calls that you get from family out of state, and the only time you get a phone call is it's usually never good news. It's almost always bad news. Somebody's sick or dying or already gone. And it was one of those days. It was February 5th. And I don't care what anybody tells you. No one is ever ready for it. And it doesn't matter how deep your faith is. The human side of us just kind of kicks in. I don't think any of you will disagree with me on that. Now, the interesting part about my story is that I didn't grow up with my father. He was married to my mom real young, and I guess a lot of people would say they got married too young, and knowing the history, it probably was kind of true, but here I am. Me, and I have a sister. And we have the same parents. But in a way, his absence made, over time, eventually, made me be very close to him in a way that I didn't even know was there. I'd look in the mirror and I could see parts of his face and how I look. And don't we all see that? We grow up saying, oh, I'm never going to be like my parents. And then you get to my age and you see things that are your parents that are really not bad things to be. So, it's that kind of thing. And I get these scam likely phone calls. And so I'm going to turn this sucker down. I personally hate cell phones. I don't know about everybody else. I mean, yeah, they're a convenience, but, it's difficult dealing with everyday things when all you can think about is what you don't have anymore. We didn't live in close proximity. I'm not one of those people who had the benefit of being able to just get in my car and go visit my father. He lived in another state over 800 miles away. And a year ago, he was fighting for his life when COVID came out. And he honestly thought that was the end for him, that he wasn't going to survive it. Amazingly and miraculously, he did. I found out things about my dad that I didn't know. And isn't that how it works when someone is no longer in your life? You start finding out things, and some things you don't want to hear, and other things you just wish you had known before. So you go through this roller coaster ride. That's what grief is. It's a roller coaster ride. The human side of me is like, it's too soon. I'm not ready. And then there's a part of you that says there were some ailments that he had that I can't imagine. It's COPD. But, that's because back in the 50s, smoking was cool, And he was no exception, but smoked 2 packs a day. Some would call it a chain smoker. And because he smoked for so many years, it was just kind of like a natural development from that. I didn't like that my dad smoked, and I kept, hoping and praying that he would quit. as his mother was the original smoker, so I guess it was genetic in some ways, or you just go by example. He didn't grow up with a dad, and I didn't, but I did. I didn't want him to go. You know, we go through this. I still had more to say. I still wanted to hear more from him. It was all I could do to stay standing, walking in that funeral home. Like, you know, that's what it's like, right? Only I've been through it way too many times, if you ask me. I found out things about him in his death that I never knew in his life. Some endearing things, some really touching things, some very personal things, and not in a bad way. I don't have any bad memories of him, even though I didn't grow up with him. The times that I did have with him were good ones. Some very good. So when you have grief, you can deal with it in a lot of different ways. Some people try to ignore it, shut it out, bury it underneath the skin, and then cry themselves to sleep at night. And then you can do something about it. You can get involved with something that your parent would be proud of you doing, or something that, if they have an illness that takes their life, that you can get involved with volunteer work and try to help find a cure for that illness or whatever. You know, different things like that. And that's one of the things, and in grief, it helps in the healing process. And I'm one of those people that I will do good for a few days, and then all of a sudden something just sparks that feeling of what I don't have anymore. And then waterworks, you know. It's normal. I had an aunt that when my mom's brother died, she said something very poignant to me. She says, I know it hurts. She says, I can't do anything to take the hurt away. And she's right. There's not a human being on the planet that when you're grieving that can take that hurt away. You'll learn to soften it for yourself somehow. Whether it's to try to continue on a legacy. Let's say your dad was a great carpenter. So you decide, well, I really like doing that kind of thing too. So I'm just going to start building things in his memory. It's a good way to deal with grief. It's a healthy way to deal with it. Me, I don't know anything other than I think my overly creative mindset is from him. And he did a lot of creative things. And I find myself doing so many creative things that I lose focus on other things. So that's kind of like I have to learn how to do better at that. And I found out a couple of things about him that have always been a part of me and never knew it. Ever since I was in middle school, I used to, write poetry. Found out in my dad's passing that he did too. I never knew it. While he was living, I never knew that. Always wondered why I had this flair for words, because I had a creative writing teacher who told me I did. That's Dad. It's all him. He used to make bird feeders out of wood. What did I do in high school? I took wood shop. But I didn't know he built stuff out of wood until much later in life. So some people will do things like that. They'll start doing a hobby that they knew their dad did, and they found out that they also had a passion for to do it. If that's what it does to help you through your grieving, then do it. It's a way of honoring those who are the closest to us in the heart. It doesn't make it easier at first. Sometimes it makes it really raw and new, and not so much new, but just like a reminder, and you don't want to be reminded of not having that person around anymore. And then you can write about it. That's what's been helping me. I have very sporadic memories of my childhood. But the ironic thing is, all the good ones were with my dad. So, what do you do when you grieve and you don't know what else to do? And you've got all this pain going on in your head, and you just want it to be a dream, to be over, and wake up and be able to just put your arms around that person that you no longer have in your life. Write it down. You know, something sparks a memory while you're doing something different, and all of a sudden it comes to mind. Write it down. Write it down. Share it. Share the good memories. That's what I've been doing. And what's really great about using that type of self-therapy, I call it, is that people who read it, it reminds them of someone they've lost and how much it makes them have that good feeling of the person they don't have anymore. So I guess the best way to deal with grief, in my case, and for other people, I'm sure, if you haven't tried it, try it, is sharing stories about your loved ones. The ones where, especially if it's your parent, share a beautiful moment, even if it seems insignificant to someone else, but it means something to you. Share it. Write it down and share it. Share it with friends. Share it with family. Put it on Facebook. Put it on Instagram. Wherever. As long as it helps you to get those feelings out. And it's kind of like painting a picture of a person so that other people understand why you're grieving over that person in a deeper, more personal way. Because like I said, nobody really knows what you're feeling. You know what you're feeling. And it hurts. And it hurts deep for a while. They say it gets better. It does to a certain extent. The ones I have lost that were closest to my heart, I still cry about them. I still wish they were here. But the parts of me that I am are a direct gift from them. So I guess at some point I will embrace that and not be so sad or grieving over by looking at it as the most beautiful gift a loved one can give you. But the selfish side of me still wants them here, just like everybody else. I really wanted to do this video on grief because it's fresh. And everybody loses someone they love. So maybe seeing someone going through it fresh and new, 2 weeks new, if it helps, and the things that I'm doing to keep my mind busy. Because if I don't want to do the things that my dad wouldn't want me to do. He wouldn't want me to be just curling up in a ball and not wanting to get out of bed like I feel a lot of times. But remembering what we did together growing up and the things that I experienced with him, and some of them were so funny, that sharing those things keeps me lifted up enough that it's kind of like honoring my hero. He was my hero in a lot of different ways. The part that makes me sad and my grief is not being able to tell him so. But I can share those things that made him my hero with you guys, with everyone else. So needless to say, I'm still writing poetry. And I don't have a wood shop, but I do have an easel and paint. So I do that. And the whole time I'm thinking, Dad would want me to do that. And I've got one more thing that I'm going to tackle in honor of him. Because if my dad can pick up a banjo and teach himself how to play it, I should be able to relearn how to play a guitar. And when I can do that, then that's probably when my grief will be at a minimum. Because it's a goal I've set for myself. Just got some new guitar strings. I just want everyone to know that when you grieve, it's okay. It's okay to cry. And yeah, some of us, like me, when someone says it'll get better, you get mad right away. Well, that's me. I don't know if that's the Irish or Scottish in me, but I get mad when people say that because I think you don't have no idea what I feel. And they don't. But don't blame them for it. They don't know. Just tune it out. That's what I have to do. When someone says that, I act like I didn't hear it. Because I know me, and I know I'll end up saying something angry, stupid. They don't deserve that. But it's normal. For some of us, that's normal reaction. So just try not to do that. Start journaling. You hear all these stories about, people think it's crazy that psychiatrists and therapists and all, and counselors, they tell you that you should journal. There's some real truth in that. When you write something down on paper, it's coming from inside. It's inside here, inside you. And I guess I'll leave you with this. My father didn't have a television. He didn't watch TV. He read books. He read the newspaper. And Dad didn't like phone calls. I mean, he would take them, and it was always great to hear his voice. But you know what my dad wanted? He wanted letters. He wanted something written down. And he said something very profound, and that's why when the doctors tell you to journal, do it, because what my dad said made sense. He says anyone can pick up the phone and talk about nothing, or whatever's going on in your life and what the kids did and what you're doing at work and all of that, the weather, etc. He said, but a letter? He said, when you write a letter, you have to think about what you're writing. You have to think about the words you're going to use, how you're going to use them, and you literally put yourself in that letter. He said, I don't want a phone call. He says, I like letters because a letter is more from the person's heart and soul. Isn't that profound? Isn't that crazy to hear from your own dad? That's what he told me. And when he told me that so many years ago, I started writing him letters. I never stopped writing him letters. I'd write him a letter every couple of months or so. And some of them were very heartfelt. Some of them were kind of just light. And like, we had a cat that had kittens or something, just stuff going on. But I wrote him some very heartfelt letters about how I felt growing up. He never really addressed those letters. But I also know that my dad thought that he was guilty of me having a rough childhood. He wasn't guilty of it. But he felt like it was his fault. And I've tried over and over to tell him it wasn't his fault. You can't control the other parent's actions, right? But what I did constantly remind him of is how much I loved him and how much I loved his hugs, and that when he said I love you, I knew he meant it. He didn't have to live in my house with me growing up. I knew my father loved me. It was in his warmth, his silly jokes, the way he told stories, the way he laughed, and his spirit of always wanting to do something different. I guess I got that honest. So my dad saying to write a letter is my advice to anyone grieving. You can write a letter to the person who's passed on and just put it somewhere, or keep it, pass it on to your kids, or you can journal and pass on the journal to, generations after you in case they want to know your experience with that person that you miss so much. Or you can do it on social media, just as, they used to take stories at Reader's Digest, and people would send in stories. And I don't know if Reader's Digest still does that. Or is Reader's Digest still around? I have no idea. But there were little short stories in there that I loved reading them. And some of them were true stories. Or you can write a book, self-publish it or whatever, just write it and pass it on to another family member. And maybe they'll get it published for you. You never know what can happen. But if it means something to you, then do it. If it helps you through this moment in time, then do it. I've got a lot on my plate, but if the good Lord sees fit, I'm going to try to write a book about my dad. I don't know if it'll ever get published, but he was a great guy, and there were so many surprises in his death that were not bad surprises either. There were good ones, amazing ones. Found out my dad was in the military, and I never knew it. So when you don't know something like that and you see that big American flag on the casket and they're playing taps, it just hits you. And it hit hard. But I'm so proud of him because now I've got something else to be proud of my dad for. And he kept it a secret. Why, I have no idea. I think it's amazing. You'd never know it. I mean, if you knew him, you'd think he was just a funny guy. I mean, I know military guys can be funny, but I never thought my dad was a military dude. It really didn't. He didn't strike me as that. He was a country boy. So that felt really good. To learn it, though, at that time, I wish I'd known ahead of time. I would have been prepared. I did just hate it when you're not prepared to hear things about someone that you love has now passed away. It makes it tough, doesn't it? Well, I figured, considering the miles separated me from my dad for so many years, physically separated, that God was giving me a couple more gifts in his death. Priceless gifts. God gave me in my father's death. Can't put a price tag on that. Nope. The Lord knows when someone can't tell a person that they care for or love, their daughter or whatever, certain personal things. So God waits until it's his turn to tell you. So maybe that's another takeaway. In your grief, you're probably going to find out some really great things about that person that you love that's gone away, gone home. And you have to think of those things as, like I do, I never would have known those things about him if he was still here. I still want him here. There's no doubt about it. But some of those surprise gifts help in the healing process, or at least I'm sure they're going to be helping. So grieve because it's normal. Don't wallow in it. Look for the bright spots. Write them down. If you don't want to write it down and you need to talk, find someone who will let you bend their ear, that doesn't mind. Someone who will listen and won't tell you to get over it. Because how can you get over not having a parent around anymore? It doesn't matter how old you are. And for my books, my dad was too young to go. But when he left this world, he was doing the thing that he had loved to do. And he was helping other people. He made his own little one-man business helping other people. That was my dad. He had a heart that big. And when God took him, he was doing his job, helping other people. It'll get better. It might be a long process, could be a short process, just depends. I didn't have any preparation time, like I said. So for me, it's going to be a long one. I already know. But I also know that God gives me things to help me get through it. And I'm just going to grab them as they come. Because I can't sit and mourn what I've lost. When in my dad's passing, he gave me so much more. If this has helped you in your grieving process, excuse me, let me know in the comments if you would. If you just want to kind of like use me as a sounding board, go for it. I'm a great listener. And I've got some other subjects to cover. If there's something you'd like to ask, please do. I need some social interaction in my grieving. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times in grief, the more people that you can get contact with or communicate with, even if it's about something totally different, it actually is helpful. It occupies your mind with something more on the positive side. So the positive side to this is it's natural. It's normal to grieve. Some people grieve longer than others, and don't let anybody tell you should be over it, because you are an individual and it doesn't matter. Nobody will ever feel how you're feeling. Nobody will ever feel how I'm feeling. I have a sister. I don't know how she's feeling. I just know how I feel. And so I'm sharing that in the hopes that someone out there just needed to hear it. And if you needed to hear it, you can just tell me, I really needed to hear your story. And if there's a bullet point that you'd like covered, just let me know. And I will try to do better at being on here a little bit more. It's been a rough road. But that's why they call it life, isn't it? At least now I can see you. I couldn't see before I had cataracts. So be safe, stay well, and God bless you all, because grief is normal.